I want to call this meeting to order and verify that the entire board is here along with trustee-elect. So,
Could I request that you all speak up so some of us would
okay,
we're
we'll
hard
try
of hearing
to
can hear.
So the meeting's called to order. We have a forum of the board. I'm moving now for approval of the agenda.
Support.
Moved by Dan, supported by Linda. Anyone have anything discussion? Okay, all those in favor, yes?
Yes. Yes.
Anyone opposed, no? Motion carries. And we're moving on to opening comments. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Vice President Wilson to moderate the meeting.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, that you have an interest in our library. We'd like to have an orderly meeting tonight. For those of you that
Can't hear you in the back.
Stand up, stand up, stand up.
Please. These are manners.
I'm deaf in one ear, so when you all talk, I hear noise. I won't be shouted over. I won't be shouted at. I'm an elected official. I do this because I care about this library. I'm here tonight because I care. There is an overflow room where this meeting is being live streamed for those of you that would prefer a seat. If you want to speak and you are in that room during public comment, we're going to ask that you come to the door here. Somebody on staff will kind of identify it. We want to let as many people speak tonight as are possible. Understand that we've had some of the books read to us. Every board member has looked at the complaint. We have a copy of it on the table. Every book that is under consideration tonight has been read by a board member or more than one board member. And when we get to that book, they will speak to it. We're going to let people speak. We're going to ask that you keep your comments as brief as possible, under 2 minutes, simply the sheer number of people here that may want to speak. At 8:30, the meeting will be adjourned. Most of the board tomorrow gets up and they go to work. And so we need to be able to do our day jobs. And so if we're not done, we will reconvene this meeting in the new year simply because of the holidays. And we will let it, again, ample opportunity so that everybody that is interested can come back. We would prefer in public comment, we're not going to tell you it's our request, that if we've heard a speaker who speaks and you agree with them, it's fine to stand up and say, I agree with the previous speaker, or if somebody has their name, we're going to try to keep fairly good notes about who speaks and what they say. Tonight, we are not deciding if these books are offensive. They are to people in this room. We already know that. We're not deciding whether your children or your grandchildren should read these books, because this library believes in parental rights and has a policy that basically says that you're in charge of your children, your grandchildren, not us. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to follow the law. We have each taken an oath of office, and that oath of office says that we will fully support the laws of the state of Michigan and the United States of America. And I'm going to read the laws that will govern the board's decision tonight after public comment. And the first one is the First Amendment to the Constitution, and it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The next law that governs this meeting tonight is MCL, which is Michigan law, 752.365. And it says, obscene means any material that meets all of the following criteria. The average individual applying contemporary community standards would find the material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. A reasonable person would find the material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. C, the material depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive way. And the last part of the law that we're going to use tonight is section 1470 of Title 18 of US Code. And that code says the matter involving minors can be deemed obscene if, one, it depicts an image that is or appears to be a minor engaged in graphic bestiality, sadistic or machoistic abuse, or sexual intercourse, and, which means both now have to be true. Two, if the image lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. That is how this board tonight will make its determination based on the law. We had behind me, when many of you came into the room, we had the layout of this library. And we're going to, for the record, set it straight. When you walk into this building and you walk to the south, you are walking into the children's area. That area is for children from birth to 8th grade. That's where their materials are. That's where their programming is. When you walk into this building and you go north, you are now in the high school and adult area. And let's be very clear, every book that is under consideration tonight is on the north side of this building. Now, I'd like to open it to the public. We'd like it to be orderly. If the meeting gets unruly, we will take a recess. We will try to come back once and continue the meeting. If it continues to be unruly, I will adjourn the meeting. So at this time, we have a couple of written letters. Again, we want to be respectful of all of your time. I've asked Hattie to simply summarize the letters that we have as the first public comments. And then if you would like to have public comment, I'm actually going to ask that people would come up and stand by this door. You can go out into the hallway and come in and line up, and we will listen to people as they come forward. So Hattie, if you want to summarize.
This first one was from community member Madison Boyle. I'll read the opening and then summarize the rest. In 2 words, absolutely not. As an alumnus of the South Lyon Community School District and someone who's been part of this community for her entire life, I cannot express how angry it makes me that there has been a challenge to the availability of information in this community. There are many reasons why I believe this claim is irrelevant. However, the simple fact that a majority of the contested books depict non-heterosexual relationships speaks for itself. The sexually explicit content of the books available to young adults is not what this is about. If it were, the many young adult books containing heterosexual relationships would have been protested as well. Protesting the content of young adult books in a public library is an unacceptable outlet for your hate. It is immoral to disguise your hate as care and concern for the innocence of the community's youth. From there, she goes on to continue talking about her background working with runaway and homeless youth, gives some more specific examples of explicit material that kids have access to, and ends by imploring us to not remove any books. The second one is from Jennifer Stagel. My name is Jennifer Stagel, and I'm a patron of the Salem-South Lyon District Library. I'm also an adjunct faculty at Delta College, Finlandia University, and Saginaw Valley State University. I'm an instructor of cultural geography and women and gender studies. I'm contacting you today due to tonight's board meeting regarding the LGBTQ+ book issue. I would like to give you my perspective as an academic instructor. In the course of my career, I've worked with members of the LGBTQ+ community, researched LGBTQ+ issues, and I have had and currently have many students who identify as LGBTQ. I would like to give you my professional perspective. She goes on to talk about how members of the LGBTQ+ community have been felt marginalized and othered, and how they still feel that way today, and the power of LGBTQ fiction for students. She finishes by quoting an article by Pope Francis, speaking specifically to religious community, asking for, sorry, I'm trying to do my best to. She quotes an article with Pope Francis where he speaks about acceptance for the LGBTQ community.
Okay, just one caution now as we move into public comment from you. At the last board meeting where these books were brought to the board's attention, we were asked to formally review them. Members of the audience read sexually explicit passages. So for those of you with minor children, we're going to ask that you exercise your parental rights and you decide whether you want your children to sit and listen to that. If you do, then you've been forewarned, and if you don't, please feel free to remove your children at any time. So I'm going to ask the first woman, and it would be helpful for us if you would at least give a first name. It's not, but it is not required.
Very good. Well, my name is Kelly Haynes. I am a wife and a mother and a Christian and a patriot. I read the Pride Guide for tonight's meeting, and to be honest, it wasn't for me. The excerpts being challenged describe how to perform oral sex, that you should wait until you're older for varsity level activities, and the importance of understanding consent and the law. Taken as a whole, this book has literary value, so it does not qualify as obscenity based on the Miller test, and it is protected by the First Amendment. But again, if it weren't for this meeting, I would have put this book down and chosen something different, because as a straight, white, Christian, cisgender female, I bet most of the books in this library have characters and themes that I can relate to, and not everybody has that luxury, even though everyone is supposed to have the same rights. Sadly, not everyone is raised to believe that, which is why there are people here trying to ban these books with LGBTQIA+ themes. And discriminating against kids isn't something that most people feel good about. So you try to justify the request with a study from Taiwan about risky sexual behavior. Is risky sexual behavior an issue in Taiwan? I don't know. Is it one in the US? Not according to the teens here or the large organizations who study us. A 2019 study from Pew Research said that 70% of teens, that is 7 in 10, reported issues with anxiety and depression. So mental health is issue number 1, followed by bullying, and then drugs, and then alcohol, and then poverty, and then sex. And the World Health Organization and UNICEF report similar findings. So if protecting kids is really why we are all here, then I think we need to tackle their biggest threats, and that's anxiety and depression. So that means we need more inclusivity, we need more community and education. Friends, we need more books, not less. Love to see less things scrawled on the bathroom walls of our high schools. We want safer places for our kids. So in closing, I ask that we stop this ban, stop the hate, and start working together. Thank you.
Ask the audience to please hold your clapping, only because it does take time. And again, there's a lot of people that want to speak, and we'd like to hear, and we'd still like for the board to be able to do its work. So the next gentleman that's at the floor, someone's going to hand you a mic if you would speak.
My name is Brian. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. This passage suggests an age of radical opposites taking place across the English Channel in France and the United Kingdom, respectively. It tells a story of contrasts and comparisons between London and Paris during the French Revolution. A proclamation for revolution for oppressed civilians really turned out to be a spring of hope. However, for an ancient regime and outgoing political system, this revolution was a winter of despair, which led to death and destruction. This phrase has great literary value in comparison and contrast of two situations and environments, not unlike we have today. While I don't wish death and destruction on those attempting to censure, I do wish a spring of hope for those that, let's face it, are being singled out and targeted. If I said I saw a hot chick outside my window this summer, a portion of you would gasp at my perceived misogyny. A portion of you would believe I was generously offering compliments to a potential suitor, and a very few of you would correctly understand that I witnessed a tiny bird feverishly trying to cool itself in my bird bath. That's the beauty of literature. It can mean so much to so many, yet so often it means what we want it to believe to mean. And I have one word for censorship: retarded. Now, many of you are going to be offended by that, but censorship has retarded the educational growth. It has retarded open-mindedness. You see what I mean? Words do have meanings, but put them into context. Put them into what the writer meant by them, okay? And I've read a couple of these books already and can't find, as a woman before me stated, probably not my cup of tea, but certainly an eye-opening. You know, if I say non-binary, some people think it's a data set that doesn't have a base of 2. Others believe it's a gender, okay? Let's get into this. Let's find a way to get through this.
Your time is up.
This time of discontent.
So I have always stated how supportive I am for the library. I tell the librarians all the time how impressed I am with their options for books, for children of color, for non-binary, non-white, non-cisgender children. And so I'm asking the board to let the librarians continue doing their jobs. They are doing an excellent job selecting books that they think are relevant for our children. And these books on differences in sexual identity and gender are needed more and more by our children these days. So please let them continue doing their job. If it has to be taken into the law, use that law as generously as you can, so our children are not the ones that are suffering from a lack of reading material and seeing themselves. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you.
Good evening. Those of you from the board will recognize my face. My name is Cassidy. Hello again, everybody in the room. Hi. I have been to several of these board meetings, sometimes as the lone voice advocating for my community. I am a proud member of the LGBTQ community. I came out as bisexual when I was 17, and part of the way that I was able to do that was because I had experienced the perspectives of people who were like me. My community held up a mirror to show me that I was beloved, and my parents held up a window to show me how the people around me who were straight might understand and adore who I was, even if they didn't really understand it. This is fundamentally what books do. They hold up mirrors and they hold up windows. It is the best that literature can be for adults and for children. And so I beg of you to consider the people who need the windows and mirrors of these books the most. I came today prepared with several federal court cases that support keeping controversial LGBTQ-friendly texts in libraries and schools. I also came with some of the most difficult reading material I've ever read, statistics on suicide and suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth. I worked for 3 years in the foster care system, specifically as an expert in raising children who had been removed from their homes because their safety was threatened due to their gender and their sexual orientation. I have plucked razors from the fingers of children who want to die because they believe they are monsters. I have stayed up all night with teenagers who cry because they don't think they'll ever fit in the world. These are the children who need these books, but they won't be the ones to tell you. Please support them.
Thank you.
It's Mary Beth, and as a proud mother of 2 loving and successful young adults from the LGBTQ+ community, it angers me concerns are only related to quote inappropriate sexual content for children. That is clearly not the case. The first line of their original letter sent to the Library Board of Trustees stated, and I quote, "We are writing to protest the Pride Month displays in the teen section of the library." End quote. If sexual content was truly their concern, an equal number of heterosexual and homosexual relationship book themes would have been challenged. When in reality, 94% of the challenge titles have LGBTQ plus content, only one does not. It both saddens and angers me to see firsthand the hate and fear that is being spread in our community. The role of a public library is to provide accurate information to its community for everyone in the community, not just the information that a certain group of people deem appropriate. You or your children, no one here is being forced or even enticed to view any of these materials. If you do not care for them, or even if you think they may be harmful, you do not need to check them out. However, you do not have the right to prevent others from doing just that. There are some materials in this library that I find objectionable. I would never want to read or view them. I, however, would not try to push my beliefs on others by demanding that they be removed. And there is plenty of case law to support this fundamental idea. One of the core values of the library profession is intellectual freedom, as guaranteed by the First Amendment stated earlier. It is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It provides for free access to all expressions of ideas through which any and all sides of a question, cause, or movement may be explored. Censorship is not negotiable.
Hi, I'm Gurney, and I'm here to talk about Fear and Fear. This book is actually found in the north side of the library. To check this out, I actually have to follow the librarian all the way across the library to the back. This is basically a comprehensive guide of support and advice for teen girls. It discusses how do you know that you're gay, coming out, dealing with bullies, consent, and taking care of your mental health and finding your community. These tools are essential for the age group, especially a minority group that is not always supported by their peers or family. The Trevor Project has reported that in 2021, the suicide rate for teen youth was 32%. That's 3 times higher than the heterosexual youth. This is not explicit material. Pulling this book is a violation of the First Amendment, and it requires to be here. As previously said, let the librarians do their job. Let them have books. There's books here, like many have said, that I wouldn't check out, but I'm not sitting here asking them to ban it. It's everyone's choice to check books out. It's your job to control your children and what they're reading. It is not the librarian's job, and therefore censorship is not what needs to happen here. We need more support as the numbers keep going up. Okay.
For allowing us the opportunity to speak. I read Camp. Camp is the story of Camp Outland, a refuge and safe haven for teenage campers who are gay, bisexual, masculine, transgender, and others. For 8 weeks during the summer, they are free to be themselves. To quote one of the campers, "I think we get to be us. We don't have to worry about the outside where we need to hide from people who will bully us. That's all we have to be, is being good at gay." During those weeks, they are helped to socialize by activities that include action, obstacle courses, swimming, movies, canoeing, putting on plays, musicals, counseling, group history classes, and fun. They are allowed to socialize with one another without fear of being ostracized or suffer recrimination. The focus of this book is 2 young men in their late teens, and the story follows from the beginning their attraction to one another. It navigates the reader through the story with humor, empathy, disappointment, and romance. The book's other message is when parents and grandparents are loving, accepting, and supportive, gay youth can be more confident and feel better about themselves. In summary, author Elsie Rosen is trying to convey the message that in many and most respects, gay youth have the same feelings as straight youth and should be allowed to express them more in the 8 weeks, more than 8 weeks a year. As a grandparent, I found this book enlightening, literary, appropriate, educational. I really liked it. I would recommend reading, especially parents and grandparents whose children do have a different sexual orientation. Thank you again.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Cindy Brony. What is an authoritarian's worst fear? Those who support suppression of information alienate vulnerable and minority groups whose actions and lives make them uncomfortable. People who advocate book bans are in good company with Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, China, Russia, and many other current authoritarian regimes around the world. Book bans have no place in the United States of America. People must be free to select their choice of information. A person who finds a book objectionable may exercise their right not to read it. A parent who may exercise their discretion not to allow their child to read a certain book without infringing upon other parents' choices for their own children. We must stand up against this erasure of intellectual freedom. I'm a wife, mother of a now adult teen, and a retired teacher. I respect and support your professional librarians' opinions about the choices of the books that are selected for your library. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bill. To prepare for today, I read the full complaint in one of the books, Boys Aren't Blue. This book's about a young man growing up Black and gay, who's trying to figure out what he's feeling and how he fits into society. It was a thought-provoking, touching book that made me think about how difficult these challenges had to be. It took more than halfway through the book for sex to even be addressed. And when it was, as shown in the 2 pages pulled out in this complaint, it describes not gratuitous sex, but what was really an assault. It described how because he was unsure of himself and his boundaries, he allowed someone to take advantage of him. If for no other reason than these 2 pages, this book is valuable to readers to help them understand how they could and should protect themselves in the same situation. But a book has to be taken as a whole. If not, you could cherry pick a few pages from many books widely accepted as having literary references or relevance. If I were to pull out a few pages from, say, the Bible, we could have the same discussion. Genesis 19, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us drink wine this night and lie with him, so that we may preserve the seed of our father. Ezekiel 23, it's in the book. Ezekiel 23, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt. I don't want my children to pick this up and read this. So am I requesting the Bible not be made available to teenagers because of these and many other passages? No, because they are cherry picked from a much larger body of writing and taken out of context. The same goes for these books. It hasn't escaped me that books you're most concerned about have LGBTQ themes. This is not only egregious, but it's personally offensive to me, given that my child is part of this community. How dare anyone tell her or anyone else they cannot read these books to help them understand that they are not alone? No, you'd rather they live in silence and shame, the number one reason so many of them take their own lives. These books are a lifeline to these youth, and they must continue to be available. Thank you.
I want to Amelia Reno Miller. I also am a wife, mother of 3. I have a PhD. I taught at the university level for over 35 years. I don't think that what we're facing here right now ultimately has to do with LGBTQ rights, pride movement, or any of that. What your job is, are whatever materials are on display, whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, are these materials sexually explicit, obscene in content? And ultimately what we're talking about here is the degradation of human dignity. What we have to be protecting is the dignity of the person in their human sexuality. And if these materials that are available on display in a teen section are not upholding human dignity, are obscene and sexually explicit of whatever spectrum on the sexual scale, your job is to remove them.
No.
And I want to stand up for that. I don't want to stand up for marriage. I want to stand up for the family, and I want to stand up for the dignity of the human person. That's what this is about. Thank you.
I'm Paul. I brought a couple more books. Again, I'll be pretty short since we're going through a lot of people. 50 Shades of Grey, very sexually explicit. I don't think everyone here should be exposed to it. I know it's a New York Times #1 bestseller. It was made into a movie about very graphic sex scenes, and they talk about sex. And I have a quote from another book in your collection. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow, and the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with the father. That has very clear themes of non-consensual sex, of incest. This book also has themes of prostitution. It's not suitable for everyone in the community. So should we get rid of the Bible? Should we get rid of the #1 book in this country? Is that what we're asking for in this room? You know, I think I read the complaint and the word that came up was pornographic. It said, these books are pornographic, let's get rid of them. I read the statements though, and I don't think I define the word pornographic the same way as them. Nor do I expect everyone in this room to define the word pornographic in the same way. But if we apply one standard, pornography, you know, I mean, to me, the definition is material that is exclusively for sexual pleasure and has no other value. If that's what this one says, then you need to expand your scope, not limit yourself to LGBTQ books, and come to the library and apply it across all people. So I'd like to thank the members of the board for allowing me to come in, allowing me to talk. And I do want to say I think it's a beautiful thing that everyone in the community is engaging in literature. You know, I used to read a lot more books, and now I feel like my attention span can only span 30 seconds videos. So it's great that everyone. Thank you so much.
I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a library volunteer. As a volunteer, I've handled thousands of books in this library. Some I've liked and recommended to others. Some I've disliked or have disagreed with and wondered why they deserved the paper they were printed on. Everyone in this room, let me repeat, everyone in this room has the absolute right to monitor and decide what is appropriate reading material for themselves and their children. However, no one has the right to decide or control what is appropriate for any other person or family. If we start down the slippery slope toward book banning, what's next? Any book written by a gay author? Anti-racism books? History that might make you or your children uncomfortable? Books on religions that aren't your own? Books on politics you don't agree with? There are already two ways books are removed from shelves in this library. One, they're checked out so often to become worn or damaged. Two, they are not checked out for at least 2 years and so are removed to make space for newer books. It's quite simple, really. If you don't like a book, don't check it out. But do not presume to know what book I or my family want to read. Let this library continue to provide access to information for the entire community, not just a select few. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ben, and I wanted to start by saying that it's because of me that so many of you are here. I hope that you listen to what I have to say. I've been insulted 4 times since I came into the building, but I don't hold anything against the people that insulted me, and I also don't. I agree with almost everything that's been said. There's a lot of misunderstanding. The reason I don't hold it against anyone to insult me is I understand that there's a lot of people in this room that have been insulted based on a variety of things, and that's not right. That's unjust. And I also understand that sometimes people will, that's the way that they act when that's the way that they've been treated. But the reason that we're here tonight is about sexually explicit material for minors. So the actual submission that was submitted was for sexually explicit material targeting minors in the church, or I'm sorry, in the So it's about a parent's rights. So I've heard people say before, like there's pornography on Netflix, there's pornography on the internet, there's pornography all over the place. It's a parent's right, or it's a parent's responsibility to guard their children. But all of those things have ways of allowing parents to do that. They have filters, they have methods, there's a rating system for movies. I've heard people say that just because there's one small scene that's pornographic, the greater context has so much redeeming value. Well, in a movie, if there's a 30-second rape scene in a children's movie, that movie gets an R rating, and you're not allowed to rent that as a child. The other thing I want to point out is that the collection policy says, to this date, even with changes, that the teen section is 6th grade to 12th grade. So although this graphic has been changed, the collection policy has not been changed. My daughter is 10 years old, so an 11 and 12-year-old is 6th grade. It's about pornography. You're welcome.
Okay, I'm gonna read kind of fast, so bear with me, and I'm a millennial, so it's on my phone. Okay. I grew up in this town. I've lived here for over 20 years. I was baptized Catholic, raised Catholic, attended St. Joe's until I aged out of youth group and catechism, and was confirmed at St. Joe's. And if you want to go even further, I played volleyball and basketball at St. Joe's. I also grew up coming to this library religiously. Looking back, nothing in my experience as a queer woman has harmed me more than the Catholic ideals of who I'm supposed to be as a person and as a woman. The opportunity to explore via films and books and escape my reality is what kept me here. People I'm here with, friends new and old, they're some of the reasons I'm so comfortable with who I am and what is still to come. I could stand up here from these and use my 2 minutes to talk about the 16 books you feel the need to remove from these shelves and how you wish to use this motion to deprive our youth from exploring more of who they are as individuals, who they could become as people, and how they can find things that make them feel less alienated as being a teenager, as if being a teenager doesn't feel alienating enough. I can discuss how the 2 books that I read from this list, The Personal Book and Wallflower, and Boyfriend Material, 2 novels that are about healthy, consensual, loving relationships, along with the self-exploration and expression on your list of post-ban books. And I can probably also go on to discuss how they're far from the very hazy, blurred definition of obscene when it comes to literature, but I won't, because at the end of the day, this isn't about the characters or about the books. Instead, I'm going to choose to talk about the details of your reasoning for having us here tonight, and if I may quote Ben directly, from an article that was published by Hometown Life. This is about minors and age appropriateness. It has nothing to do with politics or sexual orientation. It's about putting explicit material in an area designated for minors and displaying it to confront minors with this material. It's disgusting. As someone who has read many books in the teen section of this library growing up, I can tell you that if you're going by your definition of obscene, half the shelves will need to be empty. For example, the Twilight series is often characterized as a young adult fiction and teen fiction. In this book, not only is the consensual loving relationship between the 2 characters by your definition obscene, and it makes, all right,
my name is Tina Bussell. I'm a resident of Salem. I graduated from Southland High School way back in 1993. I'm mother of 6, all who have graduated from Burlington Southland schools. I recently read one of the books we're here to discuss, Our Wilder Magic by Alice Clark. It's a lovely young adult fantasy novel set in time similar to the 1920s. It follows 2 young characters, Wes and Margaret, whose families are immigrants and whose religions differ from the majority. Not only is the book beautifully written, it offers many lessons for the reader. We get to see how hurtful the bigotry and racism is to both Wes and Margaret, and we get to see how meaningful it is when someone stands up for them. As a parent, we want our children to be happy. We want to teach them to be good members of our community. One of the best ways we do that is by teaching compassion, empathy, and tolerance. By exposing them to different cultures, teaching them about religion that's different from ours, and showing them that love is love. Reading is an easy way to experience mystic cultures, to learn about other religions, and to dive into places of tension we never actually go. It allows us to see the world in the minds of people very different from us, expanding our understanding, growing our compassion, and teaching us all the different facets that make up humanity. The scene of this book that was highlighted by the protester is maybe 300 words but 375-page book. It is a loving, intimate experience between 2 consenting young adults. It is filled with love and tenderness. There's nothing in the story that I would be afraid for my children to read. If you, as a parent, do not want your child to read a certain type of book, fine. Don't allow them to check it out. But you do not have the right to tell my child that they cannot read that book. You do not have the right to tell my child that book is not appropriate for them. Book banning is wrong, and as a community, we need to stand against it. We need to teach love, compassion, understanding, and inclusion, not isolation and hate. I'm also happy to donate my copy of the book since the current one's being held hostage.
about them. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alice Romanish. I chose to read Camp from the list of challenge books. Camp is about a teen named Randy who attends the LGBT camp each summer. He has a crush on a teen named Hudson who only dates other masculine guys. So Randy decides to transform himself into a more masculine version of himself. It works, but as they get closer, Randy is upset to learn that Hudson is angered by feminine guys. Randy also learns when Hudson was young, his parents shamed him for playing with makeup, and now they tolerate Hudson's gayness as long as he acts masculine, ingraining in their son internalized homophobia, which Randy helps him work through. Camp draws attention to the impact people in our lives have on the rules we set for ourselves on how we should exist in this world and how we apply those rules to others. I'm glad teens have camp to help them explore their femininity, masculinity, and queerness. I would have loved to have read a book like this when I was a gay teen, working to navigate my own self-expression. Ben Luther outlined 2 pages in this book, which he thought warranted a ban. It was a scene in which Randy and Hudson, a loving, honest, and committed couple at this point, have sex using protection. These 2 pages do not make this book obscene. What is obscene is that this library has been asked to remove 16 books celebrating queer lives and replace them with books that shame queer lives in the name of religion. A gunman attacked a gay bar this month, killing 5 people and wounding many more. In addition to the importance of LGBT representation for queer teens, access to stories that are different from one's own life create empathy and understanding, which is one reason of many why these books should remain accessible to queer teens and straight/cisgender teens alike. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is John Seidel. I chose to review the book Clearly Autistic by Aaron Higgins. This book is a short guide written in a way to comprehend sensitive and emotional topics such as sexuality. This book is intended as an audience for those who have autism and also the autism spectrum disorder. And for those who know anything about autism, you also know that they have a difficulty time in identifying and expressing emotion. So this book is very straight to the point, blunt, if you will, about the intricacies of sexuality, and it helps teens understand what this is all about. With that, this book, one of the chapters that is in question is relating to sex. And it gives the different types of sex options that are within the LGBT community, and more importantly, how to make it a safe experience, how to have safe relationships, and be part of the community. When I look at this book advertised online, it says it's for teens, which is 12 to 18 years old. What also happens in the public school system is the health reproductive classes, 6th grade health. From my understanding, as a South Lyon alumni, I never had any form of education around LGBTQ intercourse. Everything was heteronormative and either relating to abstinence or not. So for me, I had to learn from other sources later on in life, potentially things such as support groups or the internet. Speaking of internet, kids are curious. If they don't have access to where they can find the information, like a library or parents, they'll turn to the internet. And as a parent, if I was a parent, I would be concerned about that because that automatically then removes a layer of this bill into what I'm looking at. And with that, I think this book should still be put in place because it really helps those with autism.
Community. I lived here almost all my life. I had children here in the school system. And I actually agree that some of the content outlined is sexually explicit. I would not be comfortable with my kids reading it, but that's where my agreement on the matter ends. We can discuss the placement of books in libraries or their categorization, but demanding that books that you disagree with be removed from the library is a big deal. When I got library cards for my kids, I had to agree to several terms. One of them was specifically related to the understanding that the library does not restrict or monitor the selection of materials by minors. This responsibility lies with the parents or guardians requesting a card. It's there in black and white when you sign up for a library card. This library is likely full, chock full of explicit content and always has been. You could find hundreds of other books to be offended or concerned. The notion that we should make material unavailable to the public rather than tasking parents with parenting is ridiculous.
Danielle, and I have a big old teacher voice, so I don't know if I need this at all. I was so sure that I knew what I was gonna say to the room and the board. I was gonna talk to you about 50 Shades of Grey and what utter garbage it is, but we don't say anything, that it's on the shelves, right? I was gonna talk to you about Mein Kampf, a book that I wish didn't exist, but is in our library network, and I could get it right there if I wanted to. And then I was gonna talk to you about all the books your high schoolers read, because I'm a reading teacher, I've read every one of them. If we're not concerned about our kids reading Romeo and Juliet and killing themselves, then we probably shouldn't be concerned about these books. But then something happened today. I sat in the middle school today in our county, and I watched the gun sniffing, bomb sniffing dogs walk through my room with the kids. Because we were on lockdown again. Somebody threatened to kill us in our schools. So suddenly this became a different kind of importance for me. What if any book bans a kid from access to something that they can connect to? What if it makes them just a little more isolated? And what if tomorrow is the anniversary, not just of Oxford, but of South Lyon?
My name is Deborah Cohn. I've been living in South Lyon for 33 years. I raised my family here. I initially grew up in libraries. I went to the Monteith branch in Detroit when I was a child. I worked at a library to pay my way through college. I worked at the Mill Valley Public Library as a children's librarian, Marin County, California. And I've been coming to this library ever since. I too am a teacher. I have 5 children, and I am here as an ally to support the diversity of literature that is in this library, any library. I would say for anyone who's questioning or identifies as anything other than straight, the public library needs to be and is a safe, inclusive, and respectful place to be. How do you raise children to not be afraid in this country? My parents taught me to be respectful to people no matter how they looked or how they behaved. I stand on the shoulders of my parents. I acknowledge the work of other members of the LGBTQ+ community that have come before me. We owe these individuals that they have a voice. I will be a voice of advocacy for the LGBTQ+ community in our community. I'm here to hold the library accountable for the most vulnerable in our community. Information is critical for all people. When given information, they have received justice. The library is a place that offers help and assistance. Who is this library meant to serve? It's meant to serve all members of the community. We serve this community and we have to be accountable to them. If the library isn't serving all members, it isn't serving dignity. Dignity is a cornerstone of our citizenship and human rights. I want to say to all youth, especially the most vulnerable in our community, you matter. Your perspective matters.
Good evening. My name is Carol Tizio, and I am a state leader for Freedom on Books. We are part of a nationwide organization of moms, dads, brothers, friends, allies for the LGBTQ community. I'm here today to talk to you mainly about 2 books that were outlined in the complaint, Just Your Local Bisexual Disaster and Coming Out Insights Tips for Teens. In either of these books, there is absolutely no pornography in these books. We should be able, as parents, to be able to read these things, to have our kids be able to see themselves in these characters and these positions. In the Just Your Local Bisexual Disaster, it brings up the topic of consent, and which is very important for bisexual teens. In coming out, it talks about the importance of safe sex. And in 2 pages, it's very brief. It's not like an instructional manual telling kids how to do this. We need to be able to have openness, encourage conversation, have inclusion in our community, and that breeds kids to have acceptance. Please start being an example in your community.
My name is Tim Ryan. I thank you all for being here. I appreciate every one of you. I like Ben, feel like we're very much misunderstood with this. The charges we've leveled are about inappropriate books for minors due to sexually explicit content. The free speech is not absolute. It does not allow someone to sell, distribute content, and give access to of sexually explicit material to minors. We agree with the board wholeheartedly that it's a parent's responsibility to determine what's appropriate for the age of their children. But I got to tell you that there are not those controls in the library. There is not a rating system. I want to read something. I know we read this before, but I'm going to ask you this. If this were in a movie, tell me what this would be rated. There you stood in front of me fully erect and said, taste it. At first, I laughed and refused, but then you said, come on, Matt, taste it. This is what boys like us do when they like each other. I finally listened to you. You began stroking yourself in front of me. I just stood there nervous because I didn't know what to expect. You said, just keep watching that. So I stood there and watched you for several minutes. Then you began to moan slightly. I took a step back because I didn't know what was about to happen. It did. You ejaculated into the toilet in front of me. And on the charge that this is LGBTQ, this is not our contention. It's sexually explicit material. I want to point out a book that I looked at today that has content like this, prurient interest of minors. Tell me that this doesn't have prurient interest of minors. Educational, a Hustler is very educational. A minor asked for a Hustler magazine to be in a library. Would we put it in there? This has pictures of people having sexual acts. And this is in the teen section of the library, in a book that's loved. Let's Talk About It, the Teen Guide to Sex Relationships and Being a Human. This is what we're objecting to. It's not, we looked at a lot of other books that were, featuring LGBTQ plus characters. Those are
Who first?
I grew up liberal and conservative Catholic family. Although I'm usually outnumbered, it is not uncommon for a healthy debate about current events to break out, at least once every gathering. They usually end with my father rolling his eyes and offering me a drink. So, of course, being a glutton for punishment, I told him about the book Kisses for Jet. It's a comic book style, beautifully illustrated, coming of age story. Yes, it is told from the point of view of Jet, who in 1999 is struggling with their gender. But Jet's friends are also struggling. Typical teenage issues, weight, anxiety from Y2K, which seems a million years ago. My father's opinion, well, there's no ban needed, but I just don't like it being crammed down kids' throats. Dad, trust me. The LGBTQ community is doing no cramming. They're too tired. They only want compassion, acceptance, and respect that any and every member of our community deserves. I think I may have gotten a hoof from him. The idea is that I'm lucky to have these conversations with my dad. Book bans take away opportunities for discussions for the less fortunate. The opportunity for readers to understand different points of view in published written word, not social media. The opportunity for parents to cultivate the empathy that our children learned way back in kindergarten. And we need to empower them with knowledge and respect so that they can study, learn, work, and thrive in this world. Banning effectively stops these opportunities, conversation and education. And when education stops, it opens the door for ignorance, fear, and hate. All of which this world has had enough of. And I can tell you that my father and I both agree on that. Please stop the book ban.
Hi, my name is Joe, and I just wanted to mention. So just bear with me on this. So just imagine, and I really want you to think about this. I'm just kind of going back to basics here with this whole thing, because I think so many different things that are being talked about, but if you just imagine this in the teen section, and somebody may have mentioned this, but imagine the teen section, if on the displays, all on the displays, there were Playboy and Hustler and all these magazines that are being displayed on the teen section. Okay, some would make the argument that there's artistic content here that's valuable and it should be placed there. I want to make the point that we're following the same argument that this is explicit content. This is not this is not related to LGBTQ issues. It's really about explicit content. So if you really imagine, think about that, walking out with your kids and seeing something very, very graphic. That's the point that we're trying to make with regard to this. Yeah, there's nothing further. I just wanted to at least bring that point up to you guys, just to think about it in that.
My name is Derek. I have 3 young children. Love coming to the library. It's hard when I heard about these type of material in the teen section where my daughter can go and check out books. It is, First Amendment does not protect inappropriate material, explicit material for children. That includes minors up to 17, 18 years old. This type of material does not belong in the teen section. I'd love to be able to proofread everything my daughter is going to check out. I just don't have the time to do that. I don't have time to research everything. Does not belong in the teen section. I just don't. I just have a hard time understanding that why this material is even in there in the first place. Because, everyone has a freedom of speech, First Amendment, but it does not belong in the teen section.
Why can't we hear anybody?
Hi, my name is Susan O'Hara. Thanks for letting us speak today.
Could you speak up? Would you mind speaking up?
The mic's not working.
It's not working.
Oh, okay, I just have to shout.
Yeah, sorry.
Gotta do this.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Start my time from now. Thank you. Reclaiming my time. My name is Susan O'Hara. Thank you for having this event. All due respect to the people that are arguing that this is about sexually explicit material, pornographic material, sexually explicit. If that were true, the only thing that I can see that is offensive about this material is that it involves people of the same gender. If that were not the case, as others have said, this would be about, we would be looking at all the other books in the library. Read a thriller, read a detective novel, read a mystery, read a science fiction. There's sex everywhere you look. It just happens. Okay? This is about marginalizing LGBTQ people. This is a very, very personal issue for me because my coworker went to a bar 10 days ago, left that bar, and 30 minutes later, a gunman opened fire in Colorado Springs. He was there. Okay. It all starts with marginalizing the community, and it goes from there. It starts with, we have to eradicate, we have to hate, we have to fear that if there is something wrong with these people, they don't deserve to live. It's got to stop. Book banning is the first step in the chain. Well, first it's with, teaching your children that there's something to fear if a person is not like you. That's where it starts. It starts in the home, okay? It starts in your home. And if your children are afraid of gay people, it starts with you. Okay.
In his letter to the Board of Trustees in June, Mr. Luther referred to those who would be interacting with the pride displays in the teen section as children, who have a right to a community that respects their innocence, and apparently for whom exposure to LGBTQ issues through the very presence of books within their potential sightlines would be harmful. Teenagers are minors, and as such, they are worthy of and in need of protection. But I want to challenge the nature of the protection that Mr. Luther believes is necessary and appropriate. Adolescence is a unique period of growth in the brain and the body as it transitions from childhood to adulthood.
In adolescence, the brain grows at a rate only experienced previously between birth and 2 years old. To shelter an adolescent from knowledge and understanding the world around them when their brains are ready to make sense of that information is to willfully stunt them. The South Lyon Library mission statement is to educate, enrich, and empower our community. Censorship of books that a narrow segment of the community deems inappropriate is in direct contradiction to the essential mission of the library. Furthermore, and of dire importance, during adolescence, the brain is narrowly focused on identity development, which humans accomplish in partnership with more knowledgeable others in their community. Historically, we have seen the consequences of removing access of a people group to others in their community. I wanted both those groups tonight. Their stories are their own, but engaged citizens and students of history know that denying access to a community of resources and support has far-reaching social implications and potentially disastrous personal implications. Fully 20% of Gen Z identifies as queer, according to national data released in February of this year. LGBTQ youth are 4 times as likely as their peers to attempt suicide. That number falls by 40% for trans children, simply from having an adult in their home who uses their preferred pronouns. Young queer people are incredibly marginalized and incredibly vulnerable. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Wagner. I have a son who went through the South Lyon schools, and he experienced it, or he had more pornography shoved in his face on the school bus than he did that's available in the library. He had you can set up all the straw men you want, you can try to cover up all the fear you want. At 12 and 13 years old, that's when children are starting to question things. That's when children are starting to figure out who they are. And at least I had the communication with my son to be able to he would tell me what he saw, and I would be able to explain things. It's the communication. If he had the resources in the library to find things and find out things for himself, I know this library is picking out safe things that he could have explained things to him, and everything. That should be available to all those people that are questioning themselves, questioning how they need to be brought up, questioning, things they can't find at home. If they don't have that communication at home to figure things out, I'm so glad that they have this resource like the South Lyon Public Library to help them.
Can you hear me in the back? My name is Vanessa Torres. I'm an 11-year resident of South Lyon by way of Texas. Don't hold it against me. I got here as soon as I could. I got 2 quick stories tonight to just sort of address the dog whistles that everybody has been sort of mentioning. One is parental rights, and the other is about explicit content. The first is when I was like 13 or 14, I took myself to the Walden Books in the mall and bought a book that I was really excited was coming out. It was based on a TV show I had loved. And I brought it home, and I'd read maybe 3 pages, and my mom picked it up, turned the middle, read the chapter, and said, nope, this is going back. She gave it to my dad, and he went and he returned it. There's nothing that keeps any parent from letting their child come to the library and then reviewing what they brought home. Yeah. That's what parental rights are. Mm-hmm. Second, everybody's talking about, or those who are bringing up this ban are talking about explicit content, which it's been said, you can go to any other book, and I can definitely pull some graphic novels that have other content that's heterosexual in nature that is just as explicit. This is about hate, and it's being hidden behind these different arguments. I walked into the library late because it was hard to find parking, and I walked up near a couple, and a woman in the back said to her husband something. And I thought, well, that's a private conversation, and I overheard it. I'm gonna let it go. And then I got to see her write it on a text message to somebody, a very large text, after she'd taken a picture of all of the pride flags waving, and she wrote it out. I thought, you just can't let it go. And I said, are you gonna say that into the mic? She said no, but it was better. But what she said to her companion and what she texted her friend was, it was better when these people stayed in the closet. Oh. And that's what this is about. It is not about sexual content in books. It is not about parental rights. It's about hate. And I hope that you will continue to uphold the rights of all public citizens who will actually be responsible.
Yes, if the audience not applaud. We are rapidly running through the time for the meeting. We continue to hear, we'll continue to hear if that's what the audience wants to do so that we can't actually address the books. But when you clap, you waste time that we could be used either to hear the public or for the board to deliberate. And that's the other thing I would say to everybody that still wants to speak. We have heard you, we don't want to cut anybody off, but there are several themes here tonight. And we respectfully listen to them, we will continue, but I do have board members that would like to get to the heart of the meeting, which is, what is the board going to do with the books? So again, we will continue to listen to public comment, but it would be helpful for the board if we were allowed to have some time to actually deliberate tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Susan. I'm here. I have two grandchildren that they read a lot, and there is no way their mother could ever really know what's in all of their books because they read so much. They're now age 8 and 10. When they become teens and they are checking out books from the teen section, their mother is not going to be able to censor and watch every single thing that they read. There's no way. Many of the titles, you can't tell what the book is exactly about. They seem innocuous. Yay, I'm gay. That doesn't seem like I would censor a book like that. But there were things in those books that are dangerous, just as dangerous as a piece of glass in a bouncy. You would say, okay, kid, go and jump around in there because it's fun, knowing that there's a piece of glass in there. Now, where do you draw the line? First of all, I don't recommend getting rid of the books at all. Move them to the adult section. Have reading lists available for people who are looking for these types of books so they can find them easily. But should a 12-year-old accidentally find a book that describes how to lubricate somebody? I don't think so. I don't think that is necessary to love my brother who is gay to know how he lubricates. That's not necessary and it's inappropriate for a child to read. Michigan code covers this. MCL 750.1545C. What is limited sexual acts? Codes cover it saying limited sexual acts that include children under 18 are considered sexually explicit. Exposing children to sexually explicit acts that are listed in our code is considered child abuse. So I would ask that you judge this.
I want to start out by saying that I am a mother to a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old girl, and I read the book, None of the Above. None of the Above is a novel about an 18-year-old woman who, upon attending her first gynecological exam, discovers she is afflicted with AIS, androgen insensitivity syndrome. This young woman, Chrissy, outwardly developed as a typical female, as is the case with most individuals with AIS. She developed breasts and had a normal external vulva. She was therefore raised as a girl. Upon this diagnosis, she learned that she did not have a uterus or ovaries, but in fact had undescended testicles in her abdomen. Individuals with AIS, along with many other syndromes, are referred to as intersex, formerly referred to as hermaphrodites. None of the above follows Chrissy's journey from diagnosis through distress and confusion and finally to the road to acceptance. The pages which the complaint is opposed to contain a conversation between Chrissy and her school counselor. News of Chrissy's diagnosis was leaked to the entire school and she was facing intense harassment and bullying. Her boyfriend broke up with her, accusing her of tricking him into being with a man. Her best friend would no longer speak with her. Slurs were painted on her locker. Additionally, she wrestled with the question of whether she truly was a woman, and she always believed herself to be. The counselor was meeting with Chrissy to discuss the recent events and plan a path forward for Chrissy to finish her senior year. It was all too much for her, so upon arriving home from school, she called her doctor and requested an appointment for a surgery to remove her testicles. Despite warnings from her doctors that this would send her life-changing decision. Perhaps if she had a book like this, none of the above, she would not have felt so alone. None of the above was written by a medical doctor who had a memorable encounter with an intersex individual during her residency. The author realized the struggles facing individuals with this diagnosis, the confusion and otherness felt by the intersex community. This novel was written to provide support and understanding to these people. It is incredibly informative, not only because it is full of accurate medical information about this diagnosis, but it also lets you into the mind of someone who is wrestling with their feelings about how their body was formed. It should be recommended reading to the general population to help increase the knowledge of and help develop empathy for individuals facing this diagnosis. It is also an invaluable resource to those in the intersex community. To be able to read a story about someone facing something you yourself have gone through can bring comfort and inspire strength. Banning this book from the public library would be a loss for both the general population and the LGBTQIA+ community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie. I've been a card holder at the library since 2016 when I moved here, and my 3 daughters, ages 5, 8, and 19, all use this library. I value diversity and inclusion and sex education, and I support the LGBTQ+ community. I was so happy to see our library participate in Pride when I saw the Instagram post this summer. But I'm not here to debate family values. I'm here to voice my support for the decisions made and well articulated in the actual report 2022 letter, and thank the staff for their time and attention to this matter. I also personally support inclusion of these books, but ultimately I think that is irrelevant because there are going to be things in the library that I fundamentally disagree with and would not want my kids to either. I believe that is ultimately the point of the library in America. As stated in the library's policy that aligns with the Library Bill of Rights by the American Library Association, it's not the library's job to weigh our differences and to decide not fate. I'm glad this library serves us all. I welcome the right of any patron to disagree with the material, limit their children's access, and make their request removal, just as I wholeheartedly support the staff's ultimate decision here, and I came here to voice that support. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Stevie. I am a non-binary member of your community, and I'm going to tell my story for as a teenager, I was brought up in a very conservative home.
Closer.
I was brought up in a very conservative home. I was not welcome to express my gender. I will apologize. I will cry. I was very close to killing myself. I had my social worker reach out to a local library so that we could have a book transfer using the transfer system. Because of that book, I am here today. If these books are taken off of the shelves, I fear what may happen to the youth in this town, for they may not have that opportunity to receive that support. I appreciate you hearing me today, and I will turn it over to the next person.
Hello, I am Vicki Bledsoe. I am a member of South Lyon community. I am also a patron here since before I could read, and I'm also a library assistant, albeit not at this library, but in one in Northfield Township. And what I want to say is that, oh, and one other thing about my identity is that I sexuality should be irrelevant. And I feel like fact of the matter is that the term sexually explicit keeps getting thrown around in terms of this, but you've given up the gambit by only pulling LGBT books and pulling 2 adult romance books along with YA books, which, by the way we talk about these books as if they're for little children and not for teens, which when I was a teen, I was reading Stephen King and Alan Moore, which were way more traumatizing. That being said, as a queer youth, I found that having LGBT books in the library, albeit when I was a teen, this selection was much smaller, did provide a sense of support and made one person feel a lot less alone. And I need to make it clear that young people, which young adults and teens, are not neutered babes in the woods who are completely oblivious to sexuality until they're old enough to die in wars. The fact of the matter is that there's a vast array of human experience, and we all reach milestones at different stages in our life. Fact of the matter is that while these books might contain pieces that you might find upsetting or explicit, removing them or putting them in, or removing only LGBT books in this adult section makes it.
My son had a pep parade, just on a reading record. My youngest uses the pronoun they and them. So recent occurrence. Can you speak out? I'm very proud that there are some young people telling their real story. Stats are not stats. Those are kids. Those are kids that are dying because they are not welcome in their home. They are not welcome by their friends. They feel isolated. These books, I've read all 16 of them. Oh my gosh, some of them should be required reading for everybody, right? They are relevant and not just for someone who thinks and is questioning or has already decided that they are part of this minority community. This is for the people who are straight as well, because that's how you gain empathy and compassion and understand other. And it's really hard in Livingston County. It's really hard in the Midwest. It's really hard when you don't see and have in your lives someone who has a different experience than yours. So these books, as proud as I am to be an ally, a mother of someone in the community, and all of that, it's not just those kids and those parents. It's for everyone who has to start to understand. And about the one woman I love speaking about, nobody likes the book. If it's not well written, nobody's going to fire away. It'll come off the shelves because no one's going to fire away.
My name is Ron. If there's anything that's been bandied about, it's the term book banning, because this is not book banning. I think this is book banning. There's a great online course in Hillsdale College about the Constitution. I suggest to take a listen. What this is sexually explicit books targeted toward minors. And there have been a lot of people come in and say, well, geez, it's only this many pages and it's that book. If I don't think I should give a 10-year-old a shot of bourbon, I don't want it. That's not the same as banning bourbon. And if you put a shot of bourbon within the context of a great Thanksgiving meal, that doesn't make it any better. If you're targeting children with sexually explicit material and you're insisting that everybody pays for it, because that's one of the other things. A lot of people say, well, then don't check it out. Okay, books in the library aren't free. They're bought by everybody in the community. So if you're going to say, well, geez, don't check it out, you know what? Don't expect everybody else to pay for books who think you should be there. This is all a process. One other person said that there's two ways for a book to leave the library, one if it's worn out and one if it doesn't get checked out. You know what? There's a third way. Every library has a challenge process like this. That is what this is for. And so I encourage you, good luck to you all. There's no reason that we need to make sexually explicit books available to minors, especially targeted to minors.
I just like to thank you for your time. For a few minutes, I'm sure it's stressful. We appreciate you. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. As I scrolled through the South Lyon Library website, I, as many others have mentioned, took a look at the mission statement. It again states our mission is to educate, enrich, and empower our community. The greatest way to empower community members is to allow families to choose the literature they deem appropriate for their families. I grew up with a mother who idolized the editor and librarian, Joe Godwin. Heard a lot about Joe Godwin from my mom growing up. One of her most famous quotes was, "A truly great library contains something in it to offend everyone." That's what makes it great. The library should be a space for citizens to come and choose materials that connect with them.
I also think that libraries, if kids want to, they should have different groups for like books that, you know, they can read and learn about different groups of people.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I've lived in South Lyon for about 2 decades, and I grew up gay in South Lyon, and it was a really, really hard struggle for me because there was no one else like me, no literature to teach me how to be me. There was no anything, and to get rid of these books would be getting rid of chances that kids have to learn about themselves. Like coming out tips and tricks, I definitely could have used that with my mother. But yeah, I just truly believe that this is not about politics. This is about LGBT. This is about censorship. This is about all of these awful things. And I just hope that you guys make the right decision.
Hi, I'm Grace. I've lived here my entire life. And I just want to start this by saying there are so many things we could talk about, but we're here talking about censorship for an LGBTQ plus community, and they've been through so much since forever. And I just wanted to say when I was 14, police officers came into my school with assault rifles, and before I even turned 18, I lost 2 friends to gun violence. And you act like your teenagers don't know about that stuff. They do. We have access to it on our phones. So taking away these books from a public emphasis on public library, it just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
I just like to send voice saying that essentially explicit material shouldn't be put in front of minors. We don't sell them alcohol, we don't sell them tobacco products. And neither should we putting this in front of families' choice. I couldn't hear much of what was said, but I did hear somebody saying that censorship is not negotiable. But how many of you have been in Facebook jail? I've been in Facebook
Understand.
Hi, Casey. I'm a sophomore at one of the local high schools. And
Real close, real close.
hi, I'm Maisie. I'm a sophomore at the local high school. And I think that knowing that sexual topics are discussed in this book, that is a topic between you and your kid. It should not be extended towards to everyone. If you as a parent should monitor your kid and not everyone else's kid. Your kid picks out one of these books and you're uncomfortable with it, that is a matter between you and your kid and not everyone else. If you are uncomfortable with the fact I do not typically do it. It's like taking off something off a menu just because you don't like it and everyone else does. The fact that their sexual material can be extended to a whole bunch of books in the teen section, and we're here talking about 16 books that just so happen to be almost all LGBTQ+. That's why we're here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Smolsky. I'm a longtime South Lyon resident. I have my daughter Joy here tonight. She's a teenager, goes to South Lyon High School, so she's just exactly the type of person everybody's talking about tonight. I'm glad she can be here to hear about these books and about the whole process. Her friend Sarah was supposed to be here as well, but she's not feeling well. She read Camp Spirit, and I don't have a lot of information on the book, but she just texted me that she thought it was a great story, and the stuff that was, there a little bit of stuff in it, but she's like, Mr. Davis, she calls me, there's nothing in that book that we don't talk about in high school every day. So there's nothing in those books that's dangerous that they're not already discussing. And, you know, book banning is trendy right now. It's going around in communities throughout the United States. Everybody wants to say they're offended. When someone says they're offended, my response is, so what? You have the right to be offended. Being offended does not give you the right to take away my rights, my books, or anything else. Charles Bukowski is a rather famous author. Book banning is nothing new, even though it's trendy now. 30 years ago, they were trying to ban his books. He said regarding censorship, censorship is a tool of those who have the need to hide actualities from themselves and from others. Their fear is only their inability to face what is real, and I can't vent any anger against them. I only feel this appalling sadness. Somewhere in their upbringing, they were shielded against the total facts of our existence. They were only taught to look one way when many ways exist. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Todd. I'm a social worker. I've done stuff like child and family services. I've worked with victims of domestic abuse for over a decade. And maybe it's because when I was a kid, my parents always told me that librarians were the smartest people in the entire world. That if you had any problem, no matter how messy or weird or embarrassing it was, that you could go to the library and the librarian would help you find the answer to whatever you needed. I've taken that into my professional life. Libraries offer a warm, safe space to connect to the internet. They'll help you apply for benefits. They'll help you pay your taxes or your bills or whatever it is. They help so many marginalized people that I can't think of a single argument for taking one of those tools away from them, especially our kids who may have questions that aren't so easily answered by parents who just don't understand, right? So, you guys are the smartest people in the world. I think you guys made the right decision the first time, but I applaud you guys for doing your due diligence and giving everyone a chance to express themselves. So thank you. That's all.
My name is Matt. A little nervous with my voice breaking. I didn't plan on speaking tonight. I just wanted to counter a couple points that I keep hearing consistently, especially we have filters on social media. There's not a filter in life when it comes to your children. Our job as parents is to teach our children how to be critical thinkers. There's a very specific book that was brought up by a lady earlier, Mein Kampf, that is very offensive to me and people that I know. But if my son was ever ready, that there's a Holocaust museum that I can bring him to show him the consequences of that book and what that train of thought is. It's not about banning ideas. We're here to build ideas. We're here to build our children into critical thinkers and the leaders for the future. I'm not here to represent an LGBTQ community. I'm here to represent free speech and freedom of ideas. This isn't about one side of that argument or the other. This is about the consistency of our children to be intellectuals, to be free thinkers, to be able to think for themselves. It's our job as parents to train them to do so. And raise them in a purely sheltered environment is neglecting that in my opinion.
There's no one else in line. This time, we're gonna ask, I think, try to be very respectful and listen to everyone that wanted to speak tonight. And I'd ask that you would now give us that same courtesy as we go through these books and we determine their future in this facility. Again, the board is going to review them based on the law that we read before. There is other law, which I guess they kind of want us to use a mic. We'll try to pass it to the different board members. The way this is going to work, each book has been read by at least one board member. They will speak to it. We have a form. It was available online so that you can see it. It starts out, does the material, and then it picks the criteria from the code of the law. So who read can't on behalf of the board? Okay, Hattie, I'm going to pass the mic to you. I'm going to ask you to, again, the first 5 criteria, does it meet it or does it not?
All right, and the first 5, do you want me to read them all or just say which one it meets?
If it meets one.
Yeah, so it does meet one. The last criterion is that minor involved in sexual intercourse. It does meet that.
So I continue to the summary of the content. It's a story of a summer camp for LGBTQ teens. It focuses on the relationship between two young men as they grapple with what it means to be a gay man. It explores themes of masculinity, toxic masculinity, and all the complexities that go along with understanding one's identity. The bulk of the book is focused on relationships and character development. Characters are presented as complex individuals struggling with how to live authentically in the world. At the very end of the book, the relationship is consummated in one short but graphic scene. I will concede that the detailed nature of the scene may make some readers uncomfortable. But I think it's worth noting that in context, the scene is not presented in a pornographic way. In fact, one character notes that this experience is not at all reflective of what he has seen in porn online. He describes fumbling, being unsure of himself, feeling awkward. All of these layers added to the sexual experience, make this much more about character development and real life experiences than simply a pornographic retelling of the sex act. I would argue that this book does have serious literary value. Literary merit is actually really tough to define. So I went with the definition that is from the Advanced Placement English Literature curriculum, which I actually teach, developed by the College Board. The curriculum gives you a bunch of different standards for how you determine what something is literary merit. And then if it meets one of those, that's where you go. So the standard that I think this one meets is that the work shows thematic depth, the themes merit revisiting and study because they are complex and nuanced. This book, in my opinion, certainly meets that standards because it upends the traditional assumption of what it means to be masculine. The characters explore the tensions and contradictions of what it means to be masculine. Any reader would be challenged by reading this text because it encourages reflection about our societal gender norms. I'm happy to speak more specifically about more of the standards, but based on this alone, I'm ready to motion that we retain this book in our team collection.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion by Patty, a second by Dan, that this book be retained. Is there any other board member who has read this book and would like to speak to this book under discussion?
I also read the book, and the other thing I checked that the book has was political value, and that is defined lots of different Googling, but can change the way people live with and influence each other. Bullying, that I also checked that. Okay.
Any other board member who would like me to come in the discussion? All right, hearing none, I'm going to ask for a voice vote for those of you that are concerned. The way that a voice vote works is I'll ask the board to vote yes or no. If there are people that vote no, it's so noted in the minutes so that at the end of this meeting, you will know exactly how each board member voted by the way the minutes are retained. So all those in favor of keeping this book as part of our collection, yes? Yes.
Yes.
All those no? The motion carries. Okay, the next book on our list tonight that we're considering are called All Boys Aren't Blue. On the board read that. Okay, Pat, if you would follow roughly the same format, we'll pass the mic to you.
Okay, I read the book all the way through, beginning to end. And it's basically a memoir of a young black man who knew he was gay from a very, very young age. He makes that point early on in the book. There are some passages in it that I would consider graphic, but I believe that those passages, especially the one that Ben quoted, is germane to the story because it exemplifies a situation where a minor child was victimized against his will by an older relative. I looked at the incidents of those kinds of things happening, and the numbers vary because it's a very difficult piece of information to document because of the lack of reporting. But one of the percentages was that there's 28% of people when they were asked between the ages of 14 and 17, 28% of people that were asked have been victimized that way. And I think it's very important in this book that this author emphasizes how it is not the young man's fault that he was victimized. Those people who do victimize children like this very often convince the children that it's their fault. There are threats against reporting to others. There are, and somehow they're made to think that this wouldn't have happened if they weren't who they were. So, given the frequency of situations like this, I think it's important to realize, for victims to realize that they are not responsible. And the author in this book consistently makes that clear. So I think in light of that, that theme carries throughout the entire book. I think this book has a lot of merit for people who have found themselves victims against their will, sometimes at a very, very young age. So there was a descriptive section in the story that Mr. Luther was worried about, but it is germane to the story. When you read that section, it really puts you in the shoes of the victim and lets you understand the confusion, the chaos, the self-doubt that the victim then develops. And without that passage being so graphic, I think the impact of that, living through that situation, can pass you by as a reader. So at this point, I think, I do believe that I like referring all those stuff that you said. I didn't have access to the stuff you had there, but I think it all applies. That there is a great deal of depth in this book. This book is, I recommend it, read it for anybody, everybody.
So Pat, to stay with the format that we laid out, you have said that it is sexually graphic in a certain area. The next test is, does it have serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? If you could answer that for us.
Yeah, I think it does. In terms of the description that Hattie read, I think there's a great literary value in this book.
So at this point, are you ready to make a motion to support consideration?
I make a motion that it remain where it is in the library.
Second. Yes, and Mike Brown, we're gonna make sure people- All right, so I have a motion by Pat, I have a second by Hattie. Anyone else who's read the book who would like to address anything that Pat failed to address?
Not that Pat failed to address, but I did feel like that was the section of the book that he was reaching out to everyone to say, learn this and understand things.
Is there any other board discussion at this time? All right, again, I'll entertain a motion. All those in favor of keeping this book in the collection? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? No. All right, this book remains in the collection. The next book is called The Pride Guide. Guide to Sexual and Social Health for LGBTQ. Who on the board read that book? Yeah, yes.
My name is Dan, and I did read this book from cover to cover. I did not find any application of the 5 points to denote that it was pornographic.
So
This-
Dan-
I found this
Dan,
book to be-
since this is a little bit different than the books we've had so far, just to clarify for our audience, you are saying that we have a 5-point prong that comes out of law, that it does not meet any of those things which I read early in this meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. None of the 5 points which indicate that it would fall under the.
Does the board wish to hear any further discussion, since it does not meet the criteria for consideration to be removed? Okay, I just would like to add something.
Okay, sorry, Dan, but I disagree. I did think it depicts or describes sexual content in a patently offensive way. So the summary is in the title. Guide for Sexual and Social Health. LGBTQ youth. Parts that was listed was a very, for lack of a better word, clinical definition of oral sex and tips. And then there was a little section on age appropriateness in terms of age of consent. So when I looked at the book, I thought, you know, anyone could read this book. It's got lots of things about values, responsibility, because I did read it cover to cover. It's got- Sorry. It talked about abstinence, it talked about indulgence, understanding of consequences, results of action, inactions, and it listed a bazillion resources. I mean, there were so many different things. So when I go to the next test, I felt it did really have serious literary value. It talks a lot about bullying and trying to get in the community, so that's what I like. Political value. And then because I actually marked scientific value. So I would motion that we keep this book in teen non-fiction.
Okay, so we have a motion by Denise and Amy, you are our second.
Yes.
All right, is there, Dan, did you want to address anything else?
My only other comment on the book was, I thought it was very informational. The terms defined, the resources geared for the gay person that has questions about their identity. A very helpful resource. Looked at Florida as a resource using terms which, quite frankly, probably 80% of them I didn't know. It's very informative to myself. I had a different take. I also agree that it's the others.
All right, is there any other discussion? All right, again, I'll ask for a motion. All those in favor of retaining the book in our collection? Yes. Yes. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, the next book is Yay, You're Gay, Now What? A Gay Boy's Guide to Life. Who read that book?
Right, this one I wasn't quite sure about the top ones because it was another informational text, but I think there could be an argument made that it has minors involved in sexual intercourse because it is quite direct in addressing its audience, which is minors. So I kind of ran it down the rest of the line to see if it met the other standards. It's an informational guide for a young person who identifies as LGBTQ or one who is looking for information. It may reach the standard of minor involved in sexual intercourse because it does specifically detail some sexual acts. However, it's always related in an informative manner. It has a really informal, casual tone, which I think might be jarring to people because it is really intended to speak directly to teens. And he speaks quite frankly about the realities of being gay. However, as to a young person with questions, I thought the tone would likely be quite welcome because he addresses concerns in an upfront and very practical manner. Any embarrassment or nervousness is quickly pushed aside by his supportive and friendly tone. There is one section that was quite like direct in my opinion, but again, I am not the audience for that text, and I think that the directness is quite necessary because it was always framed with how to be safe, how to make smart choices, how to accept yourself and be comfortable with yourself. So though it was a little bit surprising for me to read at times, I think it's probably incredibly necessary. So for that reason, I think it meets the standard of having scientific value because it provides much needed information to a young person struggling to understand his body. And I would move that we retain the book.
Is there support? All right, I have a motion by Patty, and I have a second by Amy. Is there anyone else who read the book who would like to address anything that Patty did not?
I read all the books. One thing that I thought that was really powerful
section that his parents wrote. And it was really powerful because his mom automatically and his dad struggled, so there was a lot of stuff that as a parent, I would have, it would have been powerful.
Any other board? All those in favor of retaining this book, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. The book remains in the collection. The next book is called Coming Out: Insights and Tips for Teenagers. Who on the board read that? All right.
I also read this book from cover to cover coming out. I felt that the first 5 categories denoting whether it be pornographic or not does not apply. This book does have a LGBT plus sticker on its spine to denote that it is a LGBT book information. I thought this was a self-help guide, had lots of terms and resources. Very informative book, geared towards the gay person, but would be helpful resource book for anyone of any sexual orientation. Of the 3 books that I read for this evening, this was the first book that I had read and felt that this book was actually a better book than the guide prize. And would definitely recommend it to anyone to get a better understanding of the terms being used within society. I would move that.
Is there support? Any other board member who read the book that would like to speak to it?
Okay, so I 100% agree with Dan. The part that was up for reconsideration, I think gives it even more value because it was safe sex and hygiene information. And there was a lot of little stories in it. And it was about coming out to your family and friends. That I thought was important.
Any other board comment? All those in favor of retaining this book in the collection, yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book remains in the collection. The next book for consideration is called Boyfriend Material. Who on the board read that book? Okay, let me just make a quick explanation. Erin is a trustee elect. What that means is that she ran in the November election. She won that election, and come January 1st, she will be on the board, and Amy, after many years, over a decade of service, is going to step down. And so, as you can tell tonight, the board takes this role very seriously. He's read every book. And so Erin, because she's coming on the board, offered to be involved in this. She will speak, as you've heard other board members speak. She cannot make the motion, nor can she vote because she is a trustee elect. So it will be slightly different, but just that clarification for the audience. So Erin.
So the book I read was The Boyfriend Material. This is an adult fiction. So I feel that it does not hit any of the 5 prongs that we're looking at, because of the 5 of them, 4 of them are for minors involved. And there were no minors involved in this book because it is written for adults and it is about adults. So my recommendation is that we keep the book because it is an adult book and it is not an 18 book.
Is there someone on the board that would like to make a motion?
I'll move that we retain that.
Karen moves that we retain, and it was supported by Dan. Anyone who read the book who'd like to make any additional comment?
Okay, so I just wanted to say that the part for reconsideration in this book, they're talking, and it's a mom kind of oh, he's got a big nose, you know what that means. And then I kind of went to, it's an adult book.
Are there any other board discussion? Right. All those in favor of retaining this book in the collection, yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book remains in the collection. The next book is called A Far Wilder Magic. Who on the board read that book? So Denise, you are the sole voice.
This is gonna be short. This book doesn't meet any of the 5 criteria to even go on. I can give you a summary of.
Would anyone like to hear more from Denise? Criteria. Right, if not, Denise, did you want to make a motion?
I move that we retain this book in the adult section, in the teen section, sorry. Take that back. And move we keep this book in the teen fiction section.
Is there support?
Support.
Yeah. Any other board member want to make a comment at this time? All those in favor of retaining this book in the teen section? Yes. Yes. All those opposed, no. This book is retained. The next book is called Baby and Solo. Okay, Hannah has this.
All right. This one also did not meet any of the standards at the top. It's a realistic fiction novel. It's set in the 90s in Royal Oak. It's a really sweet story about a young man struggling with mental health issues following the death of an older brother. The section in question, he has a couple complicated teen relationships, as happens in teen relationships. He is propositioned basically by a young woman who's intoxicated. It is rather crude conversation back and forth, but ultimately it ends up being, I think, a really positive representation because he says no, because he understands consent. He doesn't use the word consent, but he realizes this is not an okay thing to do. And I think it's actually a really nice depiction of how teenagers should be engaging with consensual sexual relationships. So I would definitely move to retain this book in the teen section.
Is there support? Okay, so Denise supported this time. Is there any other comment?
Okay.
Mary, did you want to make any comment about it?
No, Patty summed it up nicely. It was a great book. I would highly recommend it.
All right, all those in favor of retaining this book in the collection, yes? Yes. All those opposed, no. This book remains in the collection. The next book is called And They Live. Who on the board read that book? Dan?
This was a book that I read that was more of a story rather than a guide, research, reference. The 5 issues which we denote pornographic do not apply. We look at our children as minors until they're about 35. The main characters in this book, over 18-year-old students attending college in the state of New York. The state of New York, age of consent is 17 for sexual relations, 18 to get married. So even if this storyline took place in the state of Michigan, age of consent is 16 in the state of Michigan. The students depicted in the book are both struggling to come out. One has additional issues of being overweight, has anxiety, body dysphoria, struggling with relationships with other individuals of his same gender, I thought it was well written as a story. Not my cup of tea, but, and I think we should retain it.
Is it your motion?
That's my motion.
Is there support? Supported by Pat. Is there any discussion?
Okay, so I agree with Dan about retaining it. Wait, I disagree with Dan at the beginning because I thought it described sexual content in a offensive way. He gave you the summary. The section for reconsideration was done having oral sex. And when it comes down to both boys were in college. So my feeling, even though I felt it is, I think it should stay in the collection. I thought maybe we should move it to the adult section. Now, I didn't know, I looked on Goodreads, I looked on all other library sites to see where they all keep it. Everyone keeps it in teen, but just because of the age, the whole story is college set. I thought that might be something we should consider. So I don't know if anyone else has questions or comments about that.
So are you asking the maker and second of this motion to reconsider that we retain this book, but we move it from teen to adult? And then need a yes or no answer.
Yes, I'm asking, especially Dan, since he read it, that thought crossed his mind.
So what we've asked now is we have a motion, and it has been requested that we amend that motion, that while we do retain the book, we move it to the adult section. So we now need Dan as a maker of the motion.
Either way. Let's keep it as teen.
Pat?
18-year-olds are teenagers.
All those in favor, yes? Yes. All those opposed, no. Okay, so the book remains in the collection where it is. The next book is Camp Spirit. And I now have a list of three. Now that we're to book 10, I have that list. So
All right, this one I also did not think met any of the standards. It's a graphic novel. It details the story of a young lesbian woman who's a counselor at summer camp. The section in question, so there was one specific part of the complaint where the main character is in a shower. When viewed in the context of the entire book, it's a moment where the young woman has the embarrassing experience of having to shower in a group setting with her much younger campers, which to me, as someone who went to camp as a young child, I remember being in group showers and how like horrifying that was. So it was not that unbelievable to me. The little girls point and laugh at her out of curiosity, just like I would imagine little girls do, and anyone who has a small little girl in their life has maybe experienced that, pointing and laughing. And she's mortified, just like other teen girls would be, and that's exactly what the pictures in the complaint show. I don't think there's anything sexual or inappropriate about the selection at all. And so I would move to retain this book.
is there support?
Support.
So I'm gonna say Dan, because I probably heard that. Did anyone else want to speak to the board? In favor of retaining this book in the collection? Yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book also remains in the collection. The next book is Kisses for Jeff. And we have, we'll read it and pass the mic down to Pat to give her the word.
This book for me was the most difficult one to get to. I actually put it down several times, and then I went back to, and I said, I gotta do this for the library. But it wasn't because of the content, it was because of the manga style. For any of you that are out there over the age of 30 or younger, manga is a comic book style. And I, maybe like a lot of you, are more used to a more flowing style of literature where you don't have to fill in so many of the gaps. You know, it's just like one comic picture after another. So it was very difficult for me to get through that book, mostly because of that style. It's basically a story about a young girl who's having some questions about her sexual identity. And it kind of goes through a lot of pictures of her, like, you know, is that kind of stuff that they do in comic books, so that you kind of get a feel for what the character is thinking and doing. The most sexual part of the book that I could find was a part where she goes into the bathroom and she faces the toilet and attempts to urinate standing up, which doesn't work very well. So then there's several panels of her being, because it didn't work very well. There was nothing, that was it for this book. So I would say for me, it had no serious literary value, but there's also nothing else in it that I would find. I'm gonna stick to my regular books for now.
I gotta add them, because I think it does have some serious it's off the agenda.
It's me.
Only because I thought, had I read the description of that moment in words, I don't know that it would have been as compelling to me. Seeing her struggle with something that was clearly like so awkward, and the panels afterwards, the reaction to it, the desire to be able to do something like that and not be able to do it. And I thought it was a really interesting way to help a reader who doesn't understand that experience empathize with someone who has had that experience. So for me, that section actually made it the most powerful. So I would motion that we keep it. Very much. I'm
No, I
sorry.
did, but go ahead.
Okay, so we have a motion to keep it in the collection. Is there a second?
Or
You, thank you. Just for clarification, because we've done it on all the others, and if you said it, I missed it, for which I will apologize. Does this book meet one of the 5 criteria where we need to do it? So it doesn't.
Not at all.
Is there any other board member that would like to speak to this book?
Okay, so I did check that it depicts or describes sexual content in a patently offensive way. It's a very strange angle that the pictures are. And when I realized the whole premise of the book was her trying to figure out her gender, then it made more sense. But I thought it had literary, artistic, and the colors are black and white and blue, so it's not very detailed. I don't know if that's the word, but
Any other board member that would like to speak? Okay, all those in favor of retaining this book in the collection, yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book also remains in the collection. The next book is called The Perks of Loving a Wallflower. And Denise is the board reader for this book.
okay, so this book, I checked the first thing, depicts sexual content in a patently offensive way. It's like at least 6 pages. So this is a book about Tommy. Her real name is Tommy Cena. She's a master of disguise. She changes her identity from young to old, from female to male, to complete these like missions. And then in her mission, she falls in love with Philippa. Fortunately, Philippa's parents want her to marry so that she can better her position in society. Philippa finally realizes that Tommy has this ragtag group of family that, you know, related to her blood, it's just a group of kind of orphans, and that's what makes her happy. So I guess it's 8 pages of consensual encounter between Tommy and Papa. They were both adults. This book is actually shelved in the adult romance novel, adult romance fiction. So it's an adult book. So I didn't check anything else. So I never read it. So I motion that we keep this book in the adult romance collection.
Is there support? All right, motion by Denise, supported by Hattie. This is an adult book. It is an adult fiction. The motion is to retain it in adult fiction. Is there any other board member that would like to speak? All those in favor of retaining the book in the adult section, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book also is. The next book is Curly Autistic, and I have on the pad as well.
Before I was retired, I was a teacher of emotionally impaired and learning disabled children. And so when I saw the word autistic in the title, I thought, I'll grab that one. And while it's being titled as referring to autistics, the information that's presented in this book is applicable to anyone. As a matter of fact, I really looked through the book for more stuff about autism and how it pertains to the LGBT community, and there really wasn't a lot. That being said, I thought it was good that they had the word autistic in there, because children who are perceived as being different are very often a higher target as being victimized. The children who are, I have dealt with them in my classrooms in the past. There was only one passage in there that really kind of referred to anything of a autistic nature. That's where she was talking about having a fidget, a fidget toy of some sort, which is, something that does help some children that have autism. So there's a lot of information in the book, however, about self-protection, consent, what qualifies as consent and what doesn't, appropriate age to engage with other people, personal safety in a number of different ways. It's written in a very, very matter-of-fact tone. It's not an entertaining kind of a read. It was another one that was kind of hard to get through because it didn't have like a storyline to it. It was informative, anecdotal, but there wasn't anything in it that fit any of the 5 categories that I found. So as a result, I would say we keep it where it's at.
Okay, so I read the book too. I thought that it depicted or described sexual content in a offensive way. Very blunt with how it states things. It's very repetitive, repeating the same words over and over, just describing things like very long definitions, but they stated it like they're trying to clarify the world for someone that needs this information, and there was a lot of upgrade. So I thought it had, because I thought the first thing depicts whatever I went down and said, I thought it had serious literary value. They talk all about boundaries and voice, so political value, and then so I said, but I think we should.
Any other board member that would like to make a comment? Motion is that this book be retained in the collection. All those in favor, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book is also remains in the collection. The next book is called None of the Above. And again, Pat was a reader on this. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I recommend it to everyone, just to the general public. This is a story of an intersex girl. We have a brief synopsis of it earlier, so I won't go through that, but she has a medical condition. She's totally unaware of her medical condition until she's 18 and she has an exam with her doctor. Prior to that, she looks like a girl, she acts like a girl, she has developed like a girl, she considers herself a girl. And through the course of the book, information leaks out that she has pansexual organs also. And her world totally crumbles. The bullying, the victimization, she even runs into a problem with the track team, the track coach. Wonders if she should be allowed to compete because she's not really a girl. But throughout the entire book, the part of the book that I truly enjoyed was the support her father gave her. She was 18, I made a point of that, but she was 18 and free to make her own medical decisions. And so she did make the medical decision to have the male organs removed. But it's a very realistic portrayal of the bullying, the stigmatism, legal issues a teen can find themselves immersed in. Fortunately, she had the support of an understanding father. But if she hadn't, there could have been a very different ending to the story. So, yeah, for clarification, doesn't mean any of the 5 criteria. No, not at all. Not at all. All right, we have a motion to retain it where it's at in the 18th century. All right, is there support?
Second.
Motion by Pat, support by Dan. Is there anyone else on the board that would like to speak to this book?
Okay, so the part that was highlighted for reconsideration was the main character was Kristen having a conversation with her counselor at school because of all when everyone in school found out. So it was talking about bullying, and then Kristen goes home, calls her doctor and asks to schedule surgery to remove her testicles. And I think her testicles has been twice. So I thought that made it really powerful, finding a safe person at school, requesting surgery to correct this medical issue, and then the medical issue, they talked about the side effects. So I believe everything.
Anyone else on the board like to speak to this book? All right, we have a motion to retain this book in our collection. All those in favor, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book remains in the collection. The next book for consideration is Just Your Local Bisexual Disaster. And we have the reader for that book is Denise.
Okay, so this book is Maggie is a bisexual and her best friend Amanda is straight. Maggie is running a dating game in photos for her school assignment, and she's playing this dating game with pretending her best friend and her are together, or her ex-boyfriend and her are together, or this new girl and her are together. And she doesn't consider the feelings of all these people that they might be hurt, and when they find out, obviously they're all upset, and she has to compare these relationships. The reconsideration part is Maggie and Amanda So Maggie the bisexual and Amanda can say that there's nothing like that, but Maggie the bisexual and Amanda the straight girl, they're arguing. And Maggie is upset that Amanda kissed her, even though Amanda asked her if she could kiss her, and she wanted to see what it would like to kiss a girl, and she accuses Amanda of taking advantage of the friendship. So this book is just, that's the argument about a consensual kiss between two girls that are best friends. So I didn't feel it met any of the top things. It's an argument about a kiss.
Russ, I think you also put some reading in this book if you read this one.
Yeah, I didn't read the whole book. I just didn't have time to, but the book was just given to me last Thursday. So with my busy schedule, I could barely fit in 3 or 4 chapters. And I was also given the pages that were considered to be controversial. And in reality, there was nothing here that depicted or described sexual content in a patently offensive way. There was no minor engaged in graphic bestiality, no minor engaged in sadistic abuse. There was no minor engaged in masochistic abuse. There was no minor involved in sexual intercourse. It's like Denise was saying, this is just a 15-year-old girl about to have her quinceañera and her family and all the things surrounding that quinceañera. And she really doesn't even, I think, know enough about sex to really determine that she is bisexual or not. But it really boils down to the one thing about a girl kissing a girl. So I would move that motion that we keep this book in the teen fiction area.
Okay, so I have a motion by Ralph. I have support by Denise. Is there anyone else on the board who would like to speak to this book? Right, the motion is that this book remain in the collection in the teen fiction area. All those in favor, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. This book remains in the collection. And the final book tonight to be considered by the board is called Very Clear and Pat. I have you as a reader of that book.
This was another one that was not a storyline book. It was an informational book. It's basically a how-to guide for girls who are considering a gay life. There are a lot of definitions intended to inform or clarify a girl who's considering a choice like this. A lot of emphasis on personal safety, comfort levels in public and personal relationships, and one of the major messages throughout the book was to be very careful in considering your choices. Be sure that this is what you want to do. Proceed slowly, carefully, cautiously. There were a lot of sources and references for additional information in the back of the book too. So it was a good source for somebody who is seriously considering something like this and maybe doesn't have a strong parental figure or person that they feel confident in going to and discussing this with. There was nothing in our 5 areas, especially that considered me to think it needed to be moved. So I think it should stay in our teen nonfiction section.
Making it as a motion. Is there support for Pat's motion to retain this book?
Support.
All right, supported by Amy. Is there anyone else on the board who would like to speak to this book?
Final thing. I checked the first one again. The past depicts or describes sexual content in a patently offensive way. Exactly what Pat said it was, and then because of all those things and all the resources and stuff, I said serious literary value, serious political value, and serious scientific.
Would anyone else on the board like to speak to this book? All those in favor of retaining this book in the collection, yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. All right, this book also remains in the collection, and this concludes the board's reconsideration of existing materials. I'd like to thank the audience for sitting there and allowing us to deliberate. I'd like to thank all of you, tonight for the respect that was shown in the room. So many times on the news, when you see this type of thing, the police are called. It's a tribute to all of you that we were able to, while we have different points of view, to be here tonight and to be respectful of each other. I do have one housekeeping issue for the board. For those of you that read a book and you have notes about the book and those notes were referenced as we made decisions, those all need to be turned in and they need to become part of the official record. Under the Open Meetings Act, if you're like me and you took personal notes on every speaker, those remain your personal notes. So again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank my fellow board members who took the time to read books. 16 books, we were accused of dragging our feet. I haven't read 10 books this year and I love to read because I have a very busy life. It doesn't matter to most of you why. But board members took time to read these books, and I think we tried to handle it very timely. We tried to handle it in the best way that we could, and that is, we don't write the laws in this country. We don't write the laws in the state of Michigan, but we are obligated to live within them. So again, thank you. The board, welcome. We'd love to have someone come to other meetings and just help us. For our library, we've done wonderful things at the library. During COVID, we put in a drive-up window to assist people that didn't want to come into the building. We've built a gazebo in the back, and we're going to continue to enhance this library for our community. And if any of you would like to be part of that, come talk to us. We'd love to have you as advocates together looking for a better library in the community. The meeting is adjourned at 8:20.